Hello, for this story box assignment, I chose a book titled Just a Little Different. How I went about selecting it was I wanted to find a book that taught an important lesson about diversity. And not only that, I wanted to have a good plot and have characters that had different identities so that the children could relate to the identities of the various types of characters. Another thing that was a prerequisite for the book was I had to have engaging illustrations and high quality text. I wanted the story to be relevant to the children so that way they can place themselves in the shoes of the characters and then kind of think in their own mind, what sort of things they would do if they encountered situations like these that the characters and stories were being placed in. I also wanted to find a book that represented characters in current text, which if the book was older than 10 years, I wouldn't really look at those just because I want a book that would be applicable to children of this generation. Another thing that I looked for was that it had to be appropriate for the grade level of the children. So the grade level that I was aiming for was elementary age. So that way they can relate to the characters and understand the stories about diversity. So here are some images of the book. And then there's also Braille on each page. Within the story box, I have some objects. So as you can see here, there is a turtle and a bunny rabbit, and that is just representing the parents in the story. And then the main characters are the newcomer, which is a bunny with the turtle shell on the back. So you can see the green. I didn't really get a good picture of it, but I cut out a ping pong ball, cut it in half, and then hot glued it to the back of the bunny object. And the porcupine is the first person that introduced himself to the newcomer of the neighborhood. And here's another page of the story of the book. And then you can also see the Braille above the text, above and beneath it. So these characters here represent the neighborhood kids that were fearful of the newcomer. They didn't really want to approach him and they didn't introduce themselves to him. So as you can tell there, those are the four main characters of the neighborhood. And then the next slide here shows a fort in which the newcomer builds with his dad. And then the neighborhood kids thought it was really creative and was excited to spend some time in the fort. So then they essentially created a clubhouse and named it. And then after that, the neighborhood kids invited the newcomer to play baseball with them. So that baseball there represents, the game that they played after the fort was built. Here's another page of the book. And then Braille underneath it for a Braille reader. And then the candles represent a birthday party that is celebrated between all the neighborhood kids for the newcomer. And it just goes to show that at the very end, they become friends and then they have a big party to celebrate his birthday. One thing I forgot to mention initially was that the objects that I would implement would be a brailler. So that way, if it was a blind student, I would have them braille out their answers on the brailler. So that way we can discuss and then have them braille it out. And then obviously the book would be included, the story box and the objects within it. For the lesson, how would I incorporate it? how I would incorporate the book into a lesson would be to discuss the various methods of overcoming fear in order to communicate with people that are different from them. So I would just discuss with the student, what are some types of ways that they can overcome fear in order to initiate a process of communicating with a newcomer. And then also, I would think it would be important to define what diversity is. So that way they have a concrete definition of what it means to them. Additionally, knowing some examples of real world examples of diversity that they have seen in their lives and that they might not have seen yet. Another thing that I would find to be valuable to talk about would be to come up with ideas of how to treat new people, how to be kind to other people, and how to welcome them into a new environment that they may not be familiar with. And then lastly, another thing I could incorporate would be to incorporate the book into an ECC lesson about socializing with people of various types of backgrounds in the workplace. If they ever encountered someone, they would be prepared and kind of know how to approach a person that they're not familiar with. Thank you.